The other day, one of my students was leaving, and we were talking about how much progress she has made in the last few years of her dance. And she said this interesting thing. She said, yeah, but now I'm noticing this really annoying thing about myself, is that I'm starting to develop preferences, and I don't want to dance with certain people anymore. And I told her, I was like, that's actually part of the journey. That kind of happens to everyone. And it's actually a marker that she's getting better, because with experience, the more we dance, the more variety of people we experience, we start to develop our taste. We develop our preferences, and those preferences end up guiding our decisions for different events or different opportunities that we might have. So it's kind of a big deal to get to that place. But I think for a lot of us, we have a lot of guilt about saying no to someone, or we don't want to offend the other person. But I kind of feel that it's one of those concerns that really holds us back. When we get into tango for ourselves, right? I can imagine a situation when someone begins tango for their partner, perhaps, like that's one. But for the most part, when we start tango, we started because it's something that we want for ourselves. And at some point we come into this reality, into contact with this idea that okay, our actions actually affect other people as well. And then we really start paying attention to that. And it happens kind of quickly. I'll speak for my own experience as a follower, that before you know it, you're sort of plugged into a certain group of people that you end up dancing with all the time, right? As a follower, that happened to be very quickly. And many times I found myself sort of outgrowing certain dancers. My preferences would change, my style would change. And I kind of felt bad, but I had to sort of honor that, because if I don't, this was the conundrum that I was facing. If I really took it personally, what I was potentially doing to the other person, like if I really spent time thinking about how hurt they were going to be, it ended up really shutting down my own experience at the Milonga, because now I'm just sort of worried about other people. And saying no to someone is a skill that I feel is essential, especially for a follower, especially at the beginning. I felt like I had to learn that early on, to just say no when I really need to. But for a lot of women, it's very hard to say no. And it's very hard to say no to people that you already know, that you're connected with. And I do feel like when this kind of thing becomes a prevalent experience at the Milonga, where we spend a disproportionate amount of time thinking about other people and what other people might be thinking or feeling towards us, or whether we're hurting other people's feelings, that really holds us back. It holds back our growth. It holds back our development. This is kind of how I see it for myself, because I went through that period where I danced with people for reasons other than wanting to just dance for myself. I danced with them because I felt like I had to, or I owed it to them. And of course, there's this whole gray area that belongs in a different banter about, how do you decide whether to say no to someone or not, and how do you indicate that? It's all cringy to a certain degree. Like, there's never a very comfortable way of facing that challenge. But I thought I would banter today about other things that possibly might be holding you back in your dance. Because when I look back, there's a lot of things like that I've noticed for myself that held me back tremendously. And it's these sneaky things like feeling guilty about saying no to someone. And I'll tell you, the way I learned that I need to stop doing that is I've had a few of these kinds of situations. And you let me know if you've ever had this happen to you. But let's say you're at the Milonga and you have to say no to someone in some context, like reject a capaceo or verbally say no. And then you're all distraught and you feel so bad and you feel like you've just ruined their night and they're never going to speak to you again. And then you see them again and they don't even remember it. And they didn't even notice. Like, to them, it absolutely did not read as a rejection. That actually, now that I think about it, that happened recently where someone came up to me like all panicked and they were like, earlier on, I'm so sorry, I rejected you. I didn't mean to, something. And they were like really concerned that I would feel bad. And I was like, what? I don't even remember that. So a lot of times I notice when my mind starts to kind of go a little haywire thinking about what other people are thinking about me, it really has nothing to do with the other people. And that energy really does not need to be spent in that state, right? Like, what we want to use our energy is more for our growth as dancers, right? Which being at the Milonga contributes to that. So I want to throw out some other potential things that might be holding you back, and let me know if any of these resonate in any way, or if you think of other things that you've experienced that really held you back in the past, that kind of, once you let go of them, your dance really changed and your experience really changed. I'd really love to hear from you. So you can always message me on Instagram at ImSoTango, IMSO Tango. That's really becoming the best way of connecting with me. So you can also reach me by email at connect@imsotango.com. But the Instagram seems to be the most available place. So I'd love to hear from you on there. So another thing that might be holding you back is not dancing with new people. I gotta say, it's a very sneaky trap. And it's even sneaky in this way that sometimes you might be under impression that you are dancing with new people, but you're really not. And I had to just see that in myself at one point when I found myself being really discontent with the experience I had on the dance floor. Like, I was just kind of bored. I wasn't excited about going social dancing. I wasn't excited about dancing with people there. And I just kind of get I have that little badger in me. So that kind of feeling of just not really being excited to dance with anyone. And it's really easy in that place when you're feeling that way to say something like, oh, there's just no good dancers here. This community is just not where it should be, and people are not really interested in tango here. So I need to go somewhere else. I need to go to Buenos Aires, where that's where all the good dancers are. I'm very familiar with that line of thinking because that's basically what I thought as well. And I was prone to taking that perspective. But when it came down to it, I had to admit to myself eventually that I just wasn't seeking out new people. I wasn't challenging myself to connect with new dancers. Either I was too skeptical and I wasn't sure whether someone was good enough to dance with, so I was afraid of perhaps having a bad dance, like that possibility, but I don't know them and it might be bad. And so because of that fear, I would tend to like exclude some people. And then the people who were like really good, I'd be like, oh no, they would never dance with me because I'm not popular enough. And so I'm not even going to try. So I was basically cutting myself off from the possibility of actually having a good time. Now, granted, of course, sometimes you take a chance on someone and it's not good. Like that also happens. But it's kind of necessary part of the process. As much as I push myself to dance with new people, which is not often, like I'm not like super outgoing in that way. I would say I'm sort of average. I tend to strive to, get a couple of new dances in every time I see new people. It doesn't seem like the more I try, the more bad dances I get, right? Like that's not what I've observed. It's like the more I dance, the more good dances I get, the more new people I dance with, like the more new dancers I discover that I like to dance with. And the amount of bad dances I get has kind of stayed the same. Like there will be once in a while, I'll get one that's kind of like, meh, not so good. But overall, it's been a positive experience. Now, granted, I'll say this, that I'm also very well versed with watching for the things that indicate to me whether somebody's going to be a good match for me. And I've done a couple of podcasts on that. So it's definitely there that also comes with experience, right? You've got to look for certain qualities that you really enjoy in someone, and that takes time. But still, I would say just taking a chance on someone and giving in to the possibility that something might be bad actually helps you grow. Because believe it or not, even when you dance with somebody that's not good, quote unquote, you're practicing. You're still honing your skills. You're still working towards some sort of technique, whether you like it or not, whether it's technique of protecting your body because their technique is really bad, or it's technique of aligning yourself in a certain way to protect your axis. Like, it's still growth. And I think it does contribute to your overall skill level quite a bit to just open up to that possibility, because just on the other side of it, just around the corner, there will be like this magical Tanda that you never expected, right? That's there too. You have to just kind of remember that. Now, this next thing that I think holds us back, and I think this applies both for leaders and followers. It's obvious that leaders are traditionally more assertive in their capaceo, kind of like that's how system is set up. And some leaders still need to be more assertive, like even how in, I guess it was the last episode that Alex and I talked about, how he had to make his capaceo more assertive, and he was under impression that his capaceo was already assertive enough, right? Like, so there's always room for improvement. And I think everyone can benefit from this more. And that is to initiate more often, like to take the responsibility of initiating the Kapaseo, whether you're a leader or a follower. And granted, some people might tell me, well, it's the job of the leader to Kapaseo, to initiate, and it's the job of the follower to receive it. There's nothing wrong with that view, and I'm fine with that being something that you adhere to. But if the objective for us is to grow as dancers and progress and get more experience, it doesn't make sense, especially for followers, to take on the perspective that you're just going to wait. When I did that, that's when I was feeling the most stuck, because it would be the same people asking me to dance, unless I was going to different venues and traveling to different places. But even so, like, it used to be that at a festival, I would just go in, put my stuff down in one spot, and that would be my spot for the whole 3 days I was there. And I was always sitting there, and people always knew to find me there. And it worked, but you know what works a lot better is when I move around, when I go to different places, and when I don't wait for the Kapaseo. When I initiate, I take the first step. And I realize that as a follower, you know, it's just something that takes time to get used to. There were many times that I would try to Kapaseo and the song would start and everybody would disappear around me. People would go off to dance and I would be left alone, standing there, looking out and not getting a dance. And that feeling is really awkward and kind of terrifying. But honestly, once you kind of experience it a couple of times, to not have that be such a fearful place is such a relief, because now I really don't care. I absolutely am okay with standing in the middle of the dance floor and for everyone to see that I did not get a dance. Like, it does not faze me. And for me to step up and Kapaseo first, to not wait to be Kapaseo'd, was a really empowering step as a follower. And it's really paid off for me as a leader now, because as we all know, women leaders have a little bit of a challenge when it comes to Kapaseoing other women. So as a woman, I have to be even more obvious. I have to put myself out there even more on a limb. And sometimes it backfires. Sometimes I do get rejected and other people see it. But having said that, the amount of dances that I've gotten and the kinds of people that I've ended up dancing just by taking a chance and looking at them and holding my gaze a second longer, because that's all it takes sometimes, right? Because we get so nervous, we like lock eyes and we look away. As a follower, oh my gosh, you know, I would miss so many dances just because I was terrified that I would be rejected. I would just look away. And that just happens a lot. So this would be a thing I would look at. If you tend to be more of a passive dancer, where you just sort of expect that dancers will come and Kapaseo you, you know, look into that. Try it on for size. Maybe take a night when you're not so afraid of other people seeing you being rejected, and just try it out. Try to initiate that Kapaseo yourself. And the next thing that I'll talk about, actually, I've already mentioned it in the last episode, and I keep talking about it. I just talked about it now, is moving around the space, right? Like, another thing that holds people back a lot of times from getting the dances that they want at a milonga, no matter what level you're at, is just moving around the room. It's sometimes that simple. because we're creatures of habit, and most people will tend to want to just stick to one place. So if you can make it a habit to move around the space, to sit in different places around the room, to chat with different people around the room, it's just such an advantage because different people see you. You end up interacting with people that you might not have otherwise. And it helps you sort of find other pathways for inspiration too. Because a lot of times when I move around the room, I end up talking to someone and having a conversation that's like really interesting. It ends up being sort of a pivotal moment in the night. And those are the kinds of things that I really love about Milonga spaces in particular, because you just never know what's around the corner. So moving around the room, I think is a really great tactic in general. So another thing that I feel holds people back without realizing it is just the amount of dancing that you actually do on a weekly basis. I hear a lot of people complain about their level or not getting enough dances when they go out, or people not remembering who they are. And it's unfair. It's unfair that our memory is not very long. I guess we don't remember people for very long. I mean, it is a criticism. I think that does happen when somebody leaves the scene for a while, or if there's a dancer who just comes out maybe once in a while. It can be difficult to stay relevant inside the scene in that way, so that people remember you and they reach out to you and capoeira you. So if you don't go out a lot of times when you do go out, most of your energy is just spent like building that groundwork and making sure that people see you and they know who you are, and you kind of have to network a little bit, especially if it's a smaller milonga. It might be different for dancers who are very seasoned and have been around for a long time. Like for me, if I don't dance for a week or two, when I go back out, like it's not going to be that big of a deal for me to get a dance. And if I go somewhere new, I have enough experience and enough confidence that I don't feel like I'm going to be that challenged. But that comes with time, and that comes with lots and lots and lots of dance time. Not class time, not workshop time, not festival time, but just the sort of week in, week out practice of being on the dance floor with other people, going through the ritual of going to the milonga, doing the small talk, practicing your capoeira. It just takes a long time. But if you can just admit to yourself that that's what you want to have that network, you want to have your dance sort of be connected and growing to the community, with the community. So you want that sort of feeling of belonging. Then you just know that at a minimum, you have to dance once a week. At a minimum. Like that's a non-negotiable. For me, once a week is a minimum. Some people, their minimum is 3 times a week. And I think that's wonderful. I think when I was starting out, I was dancing 5 nights a week. I was addicted to it. I couldn't stop. I wanted to dance every chance I had. And if there wasn't tango, I would be going to fusion dances. Sometimes I'd be going to 2 in the same night. I would go to the milonga, and then I would go to a fusion party, and then I would go back to the milonga, or vice versa. And that really, really helps. Now, I know some of you don't live in communities where you have that much dancing available to you. So that's a limitation that definitely exists. But if you just say to yourself, okay, my goal is to dance as much as possible. What does that mean? And just look for an answer there. Like maybe there's a practica you go to, or maybe you start practicing with someone, or any way that you can get in the group dancing. Like maybe there's some house parties. You can throw a house party. You can start house parties. Any way that you can maximize your dance time. And especially for those of you who do live with dancing around, you do have the opportunity to go once a week. And it's just about sort of getting over that hurdle of getting out of the house, right? It's like, it's so hard. At first, there's so much inertia, especially if you work long hours. And it's kind of like, you're going to feel really good if you go dance. But sometimes maybe if you don't have a great time, you'd kind of rather not be disappointed. So you say to yourself, well, I'll go next week, because this week I'm just not at my 100%. And I just want to go when I can really have a good time. And another week comes, and another week comes, and then it gets harder and harder. And then you're like, well, I haven't been out for so long, and unless I start going regularly, I might as well not start going now. And, and then, you finally go dancing, and the first words out of your mouth is, I wish I was dancing more. I need to practice more. It's like that kind of thing. It's like the limitations that come with not dancing. And so you just sort of have to witness that in yourself when you're ready, because for some of us, we do have full lives. We have a lot of things going on. So it's understandable if you can't for some reason, but just know that your growth might have to come from somewhere else, right? Like if we want to not be held back, right? If we want to continue to grow, we have to find these avenues for exposure. Now, there's a couple of last things I want to share that might be holding you back. And I might have started the whole list with these because these are probably the ones that will come more readily to anyone if I were to ask them, what do you think holds you back in tango? What do you think would, if you could do one thing in your dance, what would it be? That you think would help you get where you want. And those two things, either it's technique or it's the social dynamics. And when it comes to the social dynamics, what I notice is very common for tango dancers is just not investing in conversation with people off the dance floor. Tango is well known for attracting some of the most introverted people. In some ways, I feel like tango is an environment where introverts thrive because it's a social environment, but it's fairly controlled, and it's got a lot of things in place to sort of make the space very predictable. And there's an opportunity to be around people, but you don't necessarily have to interact with people. There's also an opportunity to just sort of be withdrawn and be in your own little world, which is wonderful. And this is another reason why I love going to Milongas. I love that feeling where there's a lot of noise around me and I'm just sitting there quiet and I'm just listening to all the noise. I think it comes from like being a kid and being around adults, and you're just that feeling of like being really safe because there's lots of people around you and everybody's talking, and you can just sort of zone out and take a nap, and there's a feeling of safety there that's really primal, I think. So tango has that, and I think by nature, most tango dancers really will keep to themselves if we're not reminded, if I'm not reminded to acknowledge that other people are there. I just might sit there and never talk to anyone. And it is something that I really had to commit to. It wasn't easy at first. I had to find like my own style for doing it because I'm by nature very introverted, and I'd rather just kind of stay in the corner and only talk when I need something. I listen, like I like listening, but talking is kind of hard for me at the Milonga. I just like being in my own space. But I had to admit to myself that I was holding myself back a lot, because when I would watch other dancers who were maybe of the same level as me and they were so much more popular, I was like, what is the thing that's different? They might not even be good looking according to some standard. Like there's the completely ordinary people, but somehow they're much more sought after. And the thing over and over that I kept seeing is that they were just more social. They hung out with people outside of the Milonga. They went to have meals. And granted, I still can't do that very much. Like, it takes a lot out of me to join a group dinner after a whole day of dancing, like at a Milonga, daytime Milonga, and then go to dinner with a group of people and then go to a Milonga again. Like, it's a lot. But I did commit to just at least taking the opportunity when presented to strike up a conversation with someone off the dance floor and get to know them a little bit, find out about them outside of tango with no intention of dancing. Again, this is not for the purpose of scoring a dance. It's just for the purpose of practicing that social aspect of tango that with time will pay off in amazing ways, whether it's you're going to make a friend and you'll be able to stay somewhere when you travel, or they introduce you to someone that becomes your favorite dancer to dance with. Like, it's just, that's really how it works when it comes to like progressing through the levels of tango and the levels of dancers. Like, a lot of it is this social dynamic that has to be part of your strategy. Otherwise, the other part of it, the technique, and for some people, they'll say what's really holding them back is the technique part, which if I were to pick one of the two, you know, which one I think has a bigger impact, technique or the social thing, I would say it's the social thing. The social thing holds us back a lot more than the technique thing. But if you are a dancer who's saying it's the technique, I know for a fact that it's technique. I've gotten feedback from multiple people. I'm having issues with my balance. I can't master some of the basic vocabulary. I'm having real difficulty. I'm really confused. If you're having that sort of thing going on in your mind, then the obvious step is to get help with technique from a teacher. And so many of our psychoses when it comes to tango, like, we get fixated on little things like there's something with my dance that's wrong and I have to fix it and I don't know where to find the answer. A lot of times those questions can be answered and the stress can be immediately alleviated when you just work through that with someone one-on-one, right? Not in a group setting, but one-on-one. At a certain level of progress, you've outgrown certain dancers and you're not quite good enough to dance with other types of dancers that are like the next level. Of all the stages of development in tango, this one is probably the most uncomfortable. And I experienced it as a follower very acutely when I was in Buenos Aires for 6 months, and I had this 6-month period where I really danced my ass off. It was just insane how much dancing I've done. I've never danced this much again. And by the time I was leaving, I definitely had progressed. And I was noticing that the people that were willing to dance with me, that wanted to dance with me, I was getting to that place where I'm like, oh, I kind of don't want to dance with you anymore. I want to dance with that other guy. Now that I can see that he might be within my range, now that I feel myself, I've become better technically, but there's something that's not working in my technique because that person is not looking at me. And I know it's technique at this point. Like, it was very clear for me that it was technical. So this is the place that is very important to address with a teacher one-on-one. Like, at this point, if your technique is at this level where you can feel you're in between phases, you're in between those levels, and you know some things are working and other things are not working, I feel like the most efficient way of getting that resolved is to work with someone that can really explain to you what's going on and can show you how to feel certain things, can have you feel it tactilely, make a video of it, explain it to you in different ways, work with your learning ability. I'm noticing with a lot of my students who are coming and they're at that level, a lot of what I offer to them has less to do with technique and more to do with trust in what you know, and pointing them in the direction of the stuff that they already know and building on it. So at this level of learning, a lot of times what's needed is for someone to organize the information for you, put it in order, and give you a clear path towards where you want to go. So you have to be able to tell your teacher like what you're wanting. If you want to be a stage dancer, if you want to be a social dancer, if you're wanting to be a social dancer, what level are you looking to dance at? What dancers are you trying to attract? Like, if you're at that phase in your dance, it's really important that you get help, because what held me back for a long time is just trying to figure it out on my own. And it was just so lonely and confusing. And it doesn't help to ask for feedback from your peers, because it just makes it more confusing, because your peers don't have it figured out either. They're also trying to figure this out for themselves, right? You really need perspective from someone who's done it, who's on the other side, and who can sort of throw you the rope to the next point. And it doesn't have to be like an extreme commitment of time. A lot of times at this level, it's just a matter of doing 4 to 6 sessions with a committed teacher, and then you have the work cut out for you. And then you work on that. And then you reload and you do another set later. And that's kind of what I think is the best way to sort of see progress and actually get results. But I know this is not an extensive list. And I know that for some of you, as you were listening, there were a lot of thoughts that came to your mind and maybe questions. And I would love to hear those. So if you're interested in reaching out to me, you can do so on social media at I'm So Tango. You can also join my private Facebook group, where a lot of times we'll discuss these kinds of things in my live sessions on Fridays. I do live banters every Friday at 12:30 Pacific. And just the other week we were talking about privates and the value of privates and how much value you get out of it. So if you want to join and check out the live from a couple of weeks ago, it's still in the feed. I hope to hear from you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did and you're enjoying the show, I would love for you to give me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That will really help me build this podcast and attract more attention to it. You can also submit your questions and comments in the comments section on YouTube if you're watching there. And yeah, I'll be bantering with you next week again. Until then, ciao.